First of all, Anouar, I want to thank you for the chance to talk about this extraordinary book that's kept me awake several times, because I've read it several times now. I want to start by talking about why you chose to use fiction to talk about your life.
It's interesting because I think a major reason for that is I had spent a lot of time with an Arabic-speaking man, scholar, writer in Tangier mostly, and he had been asking me questions. He had been interviewing me basically on tape for 5 years, 6 years.
On your life.
On my life.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something I tell him. So at some point, he said, you need to write another novel. And when I described the experience of what happened to me and how I got to write this novel, so I said, okay, I accepted, after he had been pleading with me for a long time.
So it was his idea?
Yeah?
It was sort of his idea?
Absolutely, it was his idea. And then, because I thought I was done writing fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So
was this before or after your mystical experience in the shower?
No. So what happened on that walk, I went back, he was interviewing me about different stuff, said we agreed on the marina of Tangier.
Okay.
We shook hands on it. I said, okay. Mm-hmm. He'd been after me for years. And I said, okay. So we shook hands. And the rest of our walk was, I had no idea what we talked about then, because I was half of my brain was focused on what am I going to write about. So I go back to the hotel, get in my room, taking a shower, and then all of a sudden, I was really hit hard. Like it came as a revelation that it would be the life of Lamine, who had now become an older man, the Lamine who interviewed C. Yusuf, and C. Yusuf, who had now become an older man, being interviewed by a younger man. So what's interesting about it...
And you realize that you would be Lamine. In other words, it would be a fictional way to talk about your own experiences.
Assuming that Lamine in C. Yusuf was also kind of me, you know.
Which is a good assumption, right?
Yes.
Did you realize that at the time when you wrote the first novel?
No. So because I said, well, I'm writing in English. I mean, about life in Tangier. I need to find a good reason why a story being told about two Moroccan people living in Tangier is being told in English. Mm-hmm. And I was living in the United States. I wanted to write in English, so I made Lamine, the young college student, as an English major and everything else. So it's like, and so in a way, yes, it was always, there's strong elements of autobiography in this, but at the same time, in my mind, I was also justifying the fact, I wanted to justify the fact why I was writing in English and not some other language.
Okay, that's C. Yusuf.
C. Yusuf.
This book is much clearer, autobiographical.
Yes.
At least as a reader.
Yes.
It is. Could you say something about C. Yusuf before we go on? Because I want to talk about your experiences in New York.
Yes.
You wrote C. Yusuf how many years after you arrived in New York?
Okay, it was published in 92. I arrived in 83.
In 83.
83. So it's like 9 years after. It was published in 92. So, I mean, I started writing a few years earlier than, so I got into writing mode because people started encouraging me to write fiction. It was completely something
because they thought you might be the Joseph Conrad, and I want to talk about your style, because I think your style is in both novels is really extraordinary. And I say that with envy, because I look at your sentences sometimes and I ask myself, well, how do you get away with that? And it goes back, I think, to your relationship to Faulkner.
Yes,
but before we get to that, I want to just ask about your choice of fiction to write about your own life and your experience. Were you considering a memoir? Like
no.
Edward Said wrote a memoir about his childhood. Have you ever considered a straight-knit memoir?
No, I never thought personally. I don't think I will write. I'm a good memoirist, if you will. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm more tempted by the fantastical, or by fiction, or by elements of like intrusions in
magic realism,
real life. So I want the freedom to be able to play, to say things and surprise myself and say, like, something that doesn't make any sense, but which somehow fits in the story. Because I experienced like magical realism. In fact, you mentioned magical realism. Magical realism is when I realized that, when I found a literature that speaks to me.
Well, not just Faulkner, because
yes,
Let's talk about language for a second, and then we'll go to that. Many of your sentences are Faulkner-esque. Is that intentional?
Yes, not intentional.
Exquisite, really
no,
beautiful.
No, they're part of who I am now. That's how I speak. When I read Faulkner, and I finally found a literature that spoke to me.
Why Faulkner?
Because
Southern American writer writing about like post-slavery America, like you're a Moroccan, you arrive in America, never thinking that you would write fiction, right? That wasn't in your mind.
Yes.
And you're educated in, okay, how many languages, but your formal language of education was French, wasn't it?
Arabic as well.
Arabic and French.
Yes.
So how in the world did you arrive in America and then discover Faulkner, and not only discover him, but identify with him so much that he starts intruding into your own language?
Yes, and I wrote a master's thesis on him. And
like you're narrating here,
yes.
right?
And so when I applied for a PhD program, I applied, one of the colleges I applied to was Brandeis, and they invited me for an interview, and they said, and one of the first questions they asked me, said, how does a Moroccan write about William Faulkner? And I said, he captured my imagination. When I say that, it's like I felt like but the way he uses language is so appropriate, because he captures all the turbulence and the tumult in the South, and the relationships and all that stuff. And there's an element of heat that style generates.
Heat, a breathless.
Yes, and I
passion.
felt, it goes against this cold psychoanalytic French tradition that with people like very self-focused in a way that, to me, always felt cold. Yes, it was literature, we had to read it and everything else, but when I discovered Faulkner, finally, it's like finding the right music. Somebody was playing my music that I felt, that I could use to sing my own songs.
So you have Faulkner, but also 100 Years of Solitude is a book that mesmerized you. Why South American magic realism? For the same reasons? For the same reasons,
except that, there are elements that are alien to me in Southern culture in the United States. So, but with Gabriel Garcia Marquez, we are right in the countryside of Tangier, like with the same people, the same ways of doing things, superstitions.
It's not Cartesian.
Superstitions,
It's not Cartesian. It's not logical. It's not based on like the myth of progress. It's something else.
Yes.
Right?
And that finally, it's like Gabriel Garcia Marquez took Faulkner to me to another level. So Faulkner is the foundation of magical realism, and so, but Gabriel Garcia Marquez took it to me.
You mentioned Conrad as well.
Huh?
You mentioned Joseph Conrad.
Joseph Conrad, Joseph Conrad too. When Heart of Darkness, or
is it because he's an immigrant? He's writing in a second language.
Yeah.
You identified that, and also people compared you to Conrad.
Well, that got me into reading Conrad. Somebody said he could be the next. He could be the next Joseph Conrad. Yes. And so when I read Heart of Darkness and the other novel, the one with the captain with the shipwreck and everything else, what's the name? I forget the name now. Anyway, his fiction is really captures, speaks to me. He's a guy who gets, he's captain of the ship. He has very strict maritime responsibilities, but he's responsible for the safety of the passengers. He gets in a situation he's supposed to do, he knows exactly what he's supposed to do, when he doesn't. He doesn't because he wants to save people. And then he gets tried in the court, but somebody else sees him and says, well, hires him. And then he does it again a second time. So people, the people who get in trouble have tragic lives, endings, situations because born out of good intentions. That kind of thing. And I think he's a master at doing that. So he does the same thing in Heart of Darkness as well, like, the study of darkness, basically human darkness, the depth of human darkness, right. Yes.
But also,
Lord Jim is the other novel.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there a political element here as well? Where he's writing about colonialism, he's writing about this clash of civilizations that comes out throughout your novel, right? You mention it several times. And in some ways, your novel is about the clash of civilizations inside yourself and vis-a-vis America, isn't it? I mean,
yes. Yeah. I mean, we embody all these trends. I mean, we are many cultures basically. You and me and many others. And we live in different places. We get influenced by different traditions, and we try to make sense of them intellectually, and so on. Like recently, my aunt died, and you know, the way people rallied instantly. I mean, between 7 a.m. she was buried at 2:30 p.m. Everything was done, and people showed up. The people carried the coffin, and people went to the cemetery. People dug the holes. People distributed bread and recited the Quran. And all of a sudden, as I was standing there on the grave, I didn't realize it. I started reciting the Quran with them.
You know,
I mean, there's
but
no
that's
other way to
what
do
my
it.
next question.
Yes.
Before you go to America, you're part of this world, and at the time, you're watching Spanish television. You're already part of Spanish culture, but you're also you're like 50th generation Moroccan, right? But you're dreaming of America already, right? And when you get to America, you fall in love with America. Do you, in a sense, when you first got there, did you forget about the cultural richness here and the religion and the bonds between people and the family life? Is that something you sort of put behind you because you arrived in America in this big, exciting, overwhelming reality? I mean, how did you feel at the time? Because your novel, in a way, is a story of love, but also heartbreak. And it seems to me, and I want to hear from you, that you fell in love with that society, with America in the early 80s, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Tell me more about.
Yeah, I mean, it was exhilarating. You arrive in Manhattan in '83, and everything was different. Everything was big. Personalities were big. People were big. There was possibility everywhere. You know, education, and there was the theater. There was still. I mean, I don't want to sound like.
No, sound nostalgia, because this is about nostalgia in some ways, right? Because you're talking about something it's largely disappeared.
Yeah, like Wallace Shawn or Wally Shawn, he in this conversation with Gregory in My Dinner with Andre, they talk nostalgically about the theater. There was a theater then. I remember. I could
it's a nice
say,
film. It kind of reminds me of what we're trying to do. Yeah.
I could say that theater was. I could understand what he was saying because there was a theater. It was not yet for the grand masses who descend on it from buses and out from New Jersey, like trips to. It was not something on people's checking lists. They were still had the bohemian aspect. Now, so yes, I feel nostalgic about that time. The movies were great, even the movies that came out at the time, and the reviews were also very interesting. I talk about all of that in the book.
Well, in the book, you talk about The Passenger, for example. Did you see The Passenger in Tangier or
in Tangier?
And that was a part of the formation of your mythology of America, dreaming, even though it takes place in Europe, but still, it's an Italian-American production, right? And it's about a person who takes on a new identity after someone dies.
Yes.
Is that how you felt in some ways? You were taking on a new identity when you left Tangier and you moved to America?
No, I mean that I don't think of The Passenger as a movie that influenced my choice of America or my relationship to America. It's a movie that inspired me. That actually, it's a movie that gave me an idea, or at least for the first time in my life, I started dreaming about my own death.
Yeah, it's interesting because the story is about someone who dies and a character takes on his identity, right?
Yes, but what happens in the end, that he dies in a remote village in Spain, in Andalus. So the way he dies, to me, I don't know why, for some reason, maybe I romanticized that particular scene in the movie, but it was, to me, it's like, if I could choose my death, I want to die more or less in similar circumstances, with maybe some trumpet playing in the far distance, and maybe some dog barking in the plaza, and it's super hot. Maybe it's in the middle of August.
Well, tell me about spaghetti westerns, because you were watching the spaghetti westerns in some of these old theaters here, right?
Yes.
Like which one? They're all, of course, shuttered now.
Cinema Paris was one of them. Alcazar was another.
Alcazar.
There used to be a Cinema Capitol. Now it's gone. It's a shopping mall or something. Right. It's a store. So they were Cinema Lux.
Cinema Lux, yes. Now it's a mall.
Yeah. So it's like all these places where like I saw a lot of movies in these places.
So how did the spaghetti westerns form your dream of America?
Oh, because they're a combination of Greek tragedies and epic tales of survival and the
violence and betrayal and all that stuff. I mean,
but the main
the
characters,
Clint Eastwood, right.
Clint Eastwood is the enigmatic American. It's like he doesn't do the wrong thing, but he doesn't do the right thing. He is a bounty hunter in all of these movies. So he catches bad people, delivers them to
But he is a bad
sheriff.
person in some ways.
I mean,
yeah, but that's part of the legend of.
But he's
it, right?
also
he's an ambivalent character.
He is, yes, but he also was unattached. He doesn't have a family, doesn't have a wife.
Yeah, he comes out. He just appears out of nowhere.
Yes,
in some ways.
Yes,
and he embodies justice, but American justice.
American justice, yes. It's like, and this is what I like about them. How I came to even like it even more. It's like at that time I didn't pay attention to the significance of the fact that the director was Italian, from Italy, not from the United States.
Right.
And so this is Sergio Leone. When he was asked, he said, this is how his idea of how the West, American West was. So it's something, and he spoke to us, because probably we're not when I came to the United States, I never watched a John Wayne movie. So I said, after this one.
So you fell in love with this country, and you were raised in a fairly religious household. Your grandfather memorized the Quran, he knew the Quran. Yes. But you put that behind you in some ways, right? Gladly. You just embraced the country of America. And that you wanted to initially study film, I think, right?
Yes.
How did you go from film? Your academic intellectual career is fascinating. That deserves another conversation. But you've gone from film to literary studies, to politics, to writing about contemporary America, Islam in America, fiction. So how do you explain this trajectory? Because it's relevant in the book in some ways.
You see, that's why I'm against specializations. I follow. There's a logic to when you are into using knowledge to make sense of history, to make sense of your own life. So you find yourself following certain path or a certain trail, regardless of whether it is in the area of politics or literature or film. But film to me was interesting because it was a possibility to tell a story differently. And it was the time when I did it, it was such a big deal.
You were at Syracuse?
No, at the School of Visual Arts.
Okay.
So it was such a big deal in Manhattan to be studying film.
In Manhattan.
In Manhattan.
In Manhattan, its glory, Woody Allen glory days, when it was a dangerous but interesting city, right?
Yes. And you're with cameras, you have a crew, you're doing photography, you're writing scripts, you're doing film history. We used to watch days and days of silent movies to go from the film. So it was a medium that was still very intriguing. It was like, this is the days before there was anything digital. Right. So in fact, I remember coming back in the summer in Tangier, it was very kind of sexy to say like, oh, I'm a film major. No, he's going to be the best. But it was like, there was a different time.
Yeah. That's what I want to talk about, how the time changed. Because you arrive in 83, but you already say in your book that already in the 80s things started changing. But in the early 80s, you're not just studying film, but you talk about these passionate intellectual conversations you had with people, both in Manhattan and I think later in graduate school, right? Say something about that, the intellectual life that enthralled you, right?
Yeah, enthralled me. And the possibilities, the conversations were organized around theater, around movies, around books. And so they gave them, they really gave them a lot of depth, a lot of intensity. People talk all the time in Morocco, but they don't really have conversations. They have they do something else. You know, they chatting, they're talking about soccer, they're doing this and that. But the conversation is an art. It's an art, but that grows organically. You cannot fake it. It has to happen
you
organically.
can't put it on a syllabus.
Yes.
It's something, and you had that in.
I had that because we had the
conversations,
themes.
Something that's become very rare
Yes.
over the years, but
Yes.
at the time there was that. Now, when you had these passionate conversations, were people interested in your Moroccan background?
Yeah, people are always curious about the fact that I'm from Morocco.
It was for them. It was
Yes.
third world. It was very far away. People didn't travel as much back then. Flights were expensive. It was
Yes.
kind of hard to get there.
Yes.
So I would imagine the conversations, people were intrigued. They asked you lots of questions, but they didn't know very much,
Yes.
especially about Tangier. They
Yes.
probably knew maybe Burroughs and the American beatnik crowd.
Yes.
But that's probably all they knew, right?
Yes. I mean, they're all, or maybe there'll be a political event like King Hassan at one point made a treaty with Libya, became he and Gaddafi did a friendship treaty, and people like were give me this making these snarky remarks to me. But it was people the Arab world was still a very Morocco's always had this very different status as very exotic and safe and that kind of thing. But the Arab world as a whole still had that kind of menacing kind of feel to it, and it's kind of different people. I don't know whether people had forgotten, but they had forgotten about the oil crisis of the 70s, but still, there was terrorism now in the air and other things.
The Israeli-Arab conflict was
Yes.
always like ubiquitous, especially in New York, very
Yes.
strong Jewish
And the other thing
community.
that changed is like the absolute very strong support in New York City for Israel. Now, I mean, and including the New York Times at that time, now it's different.
Yeah, I think maybe we disagree.
No.
I think some of it is good and some of it is bad.
Yeah.
But getting back to language,
Yeah.
you come off as a mystic when you talk about fiction. You use words like transcendence, that you get to this place that you can't get through logic. That you're turned off with a cold Cartesian French analysis and the waspy American approach to life. You have these breakthroughs by writing, and through reading and writing, right? But also in your novel, you talk about Islam quite a lot, more than you do usually. And that's what I want to ask you about. What is in this novel? What is the role actually that the Islamic tradition plays? Because it kind of creeps back in, doesn't it?
Interesting.
You talk about your grandfather,
My uncle especially.
and with this reverence, actually. And you also talk about Fritz Mautner and this godless mysticism, and but it's not convincing. I'm not saying that you're a believer, but it's that religious cultural background is still present, and it seems to me that's one of the driving forces. That's one of the most beautiful driving forces that works through the novel. And,
Yes.
and it also highlights this disenchantment you feel with the American experience over the years, as it becomes more corporate, let's say.
Yes.
Am I putting words in your mouth by saying that you learn to appreciate where you come from more in the context of this?
It was there also in Si Yusuf. I mean,
Yeah.
if you noticed. So I think it's happened. I mean, let's go back to this example of the death of my aunt and the funeral and the cemetery. So the following day, I was explaining to one of my other aunts that how amazing people are. They showed up instantly from nowhere to
People who
help.
barely knew her,
The
right?
neighbors, yes, the neighbors, people I got phone calls from the Netherlands, from France, from Spain. People are calling, emailing. It happened instantly. So I said, it's not the death of my aunt that
It's the
was
love.
overwhelming. It's the love in the community, the solidarity, the care. And then my aunt's response to me was, well, see, that's why Islam is good.
Well, it's interesting because I don't know who said this to you. I have it somewhere in my notes. But before you took off to America, someone in your family, your friend's mother, called Americans rootless nobodies, and then you're jumping ahead and you say America's a nation of law-abiding citizens and millions of inmates. You didn't know that at the time, but this mother said that it's a soulless, rootless place. And in the context of the love, it's not just Islam, because other religions have it as well, but what you're saying is that there's a kind of community spirit here that you were raised with, and you've learned again to appreciate it again?
I mean, I don't know how I appreciate it. The thing to me, you talked about tensions before. It's a tension between the love that's generated within an Islamic community or Muslim community, and the satisfaction of doing intellectual work, whether it's history or philosophy and stuff, and knowing these are two kinds of human experiences. I have come to the realization these are two kinds of experiences that are not necessarily, in the past, somebody might have used the word overlapping, but I think they're separate. They're two different realities. And for me, I need to learn how to live with that tension.
What about fiction? Because when you talk about fiction, it's neither the one nor the other. It's not religion, but it's kind of a secular religion, right? And does it take you to the same place that your Sufi relative?
Yeah.
Is it your uncle who's
Uncle,
a Sufi? Yes. Which is a mystical approach to Islam, right? It's less legalistic. Would you make that connection between what happens to you when you write, what happened to you in the shower when you had this vision, in a sense, that got you crying, if I remember correct?
Yes.
You were weeping in the shower, right?
Yes.
It's transcendental somehow.
Yes. I stay away from Sufism or any other mystical tradition, because to me it sounds to me like equally the elements of it that sound to me a little bit mechanical. In other words, you go through practices and
then you snap your finger and some.
And yes, so for me, I experience stuff, and I want to experience things as they happen. But I don't even like to name them. So something is happening. It's coming from somewhere. Like in my case, let's say my uncle who's mentioned in the book, who reads the Quran, the recite of the Quran, and everything else. He had the life of a Sufi, but he never joined a Sufi order or did anything like that. He used to go to the mosque every night to read the Quran and everything else, and he lived a very simple, austere life. Never got married, never had anything, and he died poor, had nothing.
Well, you say in the book you don't need money to be rich, right?
That's right. And so, but he was in that space. He really definitely was. I mean, I grew up with him. He's the one who taught me Arabic. So he was in that space. And what comes out of it in the Moroccan tradition, we call it, it's widely known now, it's called baraka, which is, it's a form of grace. Yeah. You know it, you feel it, you sense it.
The Hebrew word is baruch.
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
To praise, to be thankful.
Things happen. They don't have an explanation, and sometimes they don't have a name. And I'm trying to. Maybe that's why now since you mentioned it, maybe that's why Faulkner's style or Gabriel Garcia's magical realism is the right medium for me, because it allows me to be both, to be in the mystical field and at the same time make sense of it.
Well, jumping way ahead chronologically, you have this encounter in the cathedral in Sevilla, and you also say about Spain. The Spain is sort of a happy compromise between the money-driven commercial society in America and the, for lack of a better word, the traditional Moroccan world that you don't fit in either, right? Because you're not religious. You're not going to start going to the Quran to the mosque. You're not going to memorize the Quran. All that. That's not a part of you, right? You identify with Fritz Mautner.
Yes.
Would you still say that about Spain? That Spain is this compromise, or Mexico, or New Mexico, my home state? It's a place that resonates with you.
Yes.
Is that because it has that magical realism, that element of magic, and yet it's a place where you, as a secular writer and scholar, can live?
Yeah, I mean, New Mexico actually it's my favorite American state.
Because it's Moorish, right?
Because it's Moorish, because it's Chicano,
Yeah.
and because it has all these tensions in it, like this cultural, deep-rooted communities that are constantly negotiating their fate, which I love, and the landscape. It's the Luna Mountain, landscape of New Mexico, which reminds me of Sergio Leone's movies, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And all that stuff.
Exactly.
So actually,
We're coming in circle. Okay, let's talk about.
and the connection to Spain, if I may. In Spain, so for me, Spain is the place where, when I was growing up, Spain was a very Catholic nation. And then within 2 decades, they had gone secular. Right. And Pedro Almodovar, who is my favorite filmmaker, basically chronicles this change from before Franco and after Franco, the explosion of all kinds of artistic freedoms and all that stuff. But in Spain, they have retained a sense of the sacred somehow in their daily language, in their practices, in their traditions, in their fiestas.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's talk about your time in America. So you fall in love with the country, you fall in love with an American, then you have children, you get a job, things start changing, right? Mm-hmm. How does America change? Because obviously you get older, you become a professor and all that, I mean, so you change, but the ground is shifting under your feet, isn't it? Mm-hmm. How did the society change over the years? Because I don't need to read all these citations. You have some pretty embittered things to say about contemporary American culture.
Yes.
White culture, gringo culture, you call it. So New England, whatever it is, but the dominant white culture in America has changed, and you're no longer a fan. You're like heartbroken.
Well, it's it's the resilience is kind of faded. I mean, back to the Man Without a Name or Blondie and the Good, the Bad, and those trilogies. Sergio Leone, it's about stoicism and resilience. It's about conquering the West and opening up creating new possibilities and stuff like that. So I felt that I don't know what the influence of what, maybe a combination of the rise of the therapeutic society, like Christopher Lasch might have used it, for example, or the emerging culture, the digitalization of our lives in the last decade or so. I don't know. There are many influences. The end of the Cold War. May have been. We had this conversation, you and I, before. The end of the Cold War may have felt like a victory for the United States, but then
we lost.
But
Spiritually, you mean?
Yeah, people ended up being lost, literally lost. Well, what to do next? And so the superpower began to consume itself, basically, with all kinds of grievance cultures emerging and identity politics exploding. So the grand nation that was created by the founders in the late 18th century had become a shadow of itself, basically, in my view.
So in 1983, when you arrived, it was still...
Reagan was president.
Okay, Reagan was president, but you still felt the spirit of the founding fathers, the spirit of America somehow.
Yes, when you spoke, you felt it. I mean, outside, regardless of our politics now, Reagan embodied that spirit of America. Like this, it's always the city upon a hill, dawn. He beat the Soviet Union. That kind of possibility. Now is I don't know. Again, I don't know. There's not a single reason that's behind.
But it's a spiritual malaise that you talk about.
Yes,
it's everywhere in the book. There's a sense that you're like an investigator or a therapist. You're an observer looking at this society that's become sick
Yes.
right? Is that how
Yes.
you feel?
Yes. It's becoming sick, literally sick, and we know that in all kinds of ways. People, more people are getting medicated by the year. You know, younger and younger people are being put on medications. I don't know whether they have to be put on those medications, but they are. The health industrial complex, if you will, is maybe has something to do with it. The disparities, the inequities in society have become bigger and bigger now. I mean, Jill Lepore recently, writing an article, she described the new form of capitalism, Muskism. You know, I mean,
that's
it's
true. This
kind of
perverse kind of fantasy about moving to Mars and consuming, like, gobbling up as much wealth as possible because of this fantasy of going somewhere else, of starting a new colony. Is that what you mean?
Yes. So there is something, yet it's very appealing. Like, you know, Elon Musk is texting the, I don't know, or calling or texting the president of the Ukraine, and what I read in a news article in a Moroccan paper that he's challenging Putin to like a hand-to-hand combat. I mean, that kind of thing. It's like he's entertaining himself now. But in the meantime, you know, we have a global situation. We have like societies that are being frayed, seriously, severely frayed, and people with very little income, people in debt, and people who filed for bankruptcy because of lack of health care. They can only go when they get sick.
Well, what about, this is zero on one issue.
Yeah.
You said in America in 1983, you had conversations. You
Yes.
had passionate intellectual conversations about whatever, Cold War, about literature, politics, film, life, Morocco, America. Is that possible today to have those same conversations? Are you having them as often?
I am having it now, but they don't happen very often. So
Why has that changed?
Because people are no longer interested, I think. People are interested in, remember when I was in high school here in Tangier, people like used to, you know, drink black coffee and smoke cigarettes, and they imagine themselves to be like philosophers, like there's some in some French cafe.
Yeah. So they're like
now it's
Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir at Café de Paris, right?
Yeah, and look at this. Some of the things that, you know, now people are literally, everybody is on a diet. I mean, we're all on a diet now because, you know, everybody's worried about their health, and so there's a health craze that has emerged since then. I used to say, people used to ask me why I stopped reading contemporary American fiction, American contemporary fiction, and I said it's because I cannot read a writer I mean, my ideal writer is William Faulkner, who I can't imagine him like jogging or being,
That's right.
Or being on a diet.
Or going to a gym, right? Or be on the Atkins diet or something, right? So that's been a shift in just what is it? The narcissism of the society? It's a lack of curiosity about the world. What is it?
You mentioned it. Yeah, there are few authors that I read. I tried to read everything they wrote, and one of them is Christopher Lasch. Talk about narcissism. Yeah, the culture of narcissism,
But he was writing already in the 70s and 80s, right?
Yes, and so, but he's talking about he really, you know, was very prescient in this sense. He saw what was coming. The writing on the wall was there to see, but people were paying attention. I was paying attention. A lot of people were paying attention, but
what were some of the signs of the change for you?
As I said, I mean, the change, well, it's subtle. I cannot give you a very precise.
But let's say, and this is, we talked about earlier, how you have a love affair with a country, and you can be disenchanted and leave it, just like marriages fall apart. Mm-hmm. You're in love with a person, and that person changes, you change, and you go your separate ways. So we're talking about deep emotions, right? You're really enthralled with America, and the way you write about America as well in some of your books.
Yes.
Especially, I just remember your story of your son's illness and the kind of love and care you found in the hospital, and that made you appreciate America all the more at the time.
Yes.
So you begin in a sense with this great admiration. And then you end here, where your character leaves, right? Is back in Tangier. how do you just explain that deep sense of disappointment and alienation?
Well, I mean,
Both with the country, with university life, with academic life.
it's quite nuanced for me. When I go back now to the United States, and I'm in Tangier now, when I go back, I'm always pleasantly surprised at finding this great. I see that grandeur of Americans that I had seen in the '80s is still there. The openness, the hospitality in a different kind of way. The big spirit that America embodied to me. It's very much alive in the United States. I see it now in a different generation. I mean, I can go to Starbucks, for example, and I see it among the baristas and how good they may be, and how it'll be a waiter, or it'll be some person who still embodies those qualities that I used to associate strongly with the United States. So they're still there.
You go after white America pretty savagely.
Savagely.
in the novel. And you're not talking about Irish Catholics, you're not talking about Ashkenazi Jews, you're talking about a specific group. What is it, and why are they the target of?
Because they're as close as the remotest group. I mean, in terms emotionally, culturally, I don't understand the New England culture. I mean, it's like, you know, the way they dress and the way they, you know, the vacation and all. It's as different as can be from my own cultural traditions and habits.
Do you think that they feel that their culture is superior?
No. It's, to me, quite simply, it feels cold. Mm-hmm. It's too cold for me.
But their culture has taken over the world, you say, as well.
Yes.
Through Google and through Silicon Valley, you mentioned as well. So you see American technology as an extension of this personality trait in the culture that you profoundly dislike, right?
Yeah, the American business schools, or the Harvard Business School, let's say, or now there are hundreds of business schools. You know, they're all asking their students to come up with a project to sell something at the end of the 2-year course or something before they graduate. So basically, their thesis is create a project and sell it. So it generates class after class. It's like everybody is on this train now, and it's got to stop, because, you know, you cannot create all this. The mission of life, the idea of success shouldn't be like how many people can I get hooked to something or dependent on something else or something else.
So how is that infiltrated into the classroom in the humanities?
So it's infiltrated because the humanities, the number of people who major in the humanities is declining rapidly in the United States, and then the number of students who are going in fields like engineering or engineering now it's hard, business especially, even computer science and other things is that's where the money is. Also in healthcare, in health professions like nursing, but there's a different kind of person who goes into these places, to these majors. So, but philosophy, anthropology, archaeology, Latin.
Do you think it goes in both directions? In other words, students are being pulled into other fields because they can get jobs, but do you think they're being pushed by the way humanities are being taught, by the culture within humanities departments? Do you think that's a problem too? As you mentioned, the lack of conversation.
Yes.
And if the humanities were as alive as you experienced them in the 80s, do you think as many students would turn their backs?
Well, I mean, different, again, it's very hard to explain. But basically, we know that we have the numbers that there are fewer and fewer students majoring in the humanities than they do in other programs. So we know that. Why is that happening? We often hear about the cost of higher education, and there's no return on investment. So now that is the big conversation in higher education. Is in fact the federal government in the United States is trying to hold colleges accountable, especially those with big endowments, to prove that what the students are buying from these universities translates into well-paying jobs, is worth the price.
And you think that's disastrous?
That is disastrous. I think I benefit from American higher education. I work in a private university. And I know we work very hard at giving a good education to our students, including those in the health professions and all those other majors. But to me, the people have to borrow huge amounts of money, tens of thousands of dollars, to get an education. Doesn't sound right.
Well, you're even stronger in your book. You say that it just shows a disregard for students.
Yeah, but for the young, for young. But the question is, if debt was not an issue, would we have more students doing the humanities now? And that's the question that I don't know. I'm not sure, because if you look at other places like Morocco, for example, you find a similar pattern. Most students are going into other fields and they're abandoning the humanities, except for an English major. I was told is the most heavily enrolled major in Moroccan universities.
Because it's a stepping stone to jobs, maybe, because of the language.
Because of the language, yes.
So what's your ideal university like?
Jeffersonian. Just that is to read books and have conversations. Or maybe, what did Benjamin Franklin create? The Society of Junto, a philosophy club. Have these conversations, read books, read them very deeply.
But what's the aim of reading all this? I mean, this is the ultimate question that I have. Is
self-enrichment. Because if you enrich yourself, then you have something to give to others.
Well, but is it purely individual, like self-enrichment?
Yeah, well, it's like being a Sufi, or it's like being a physician. You educate yourself so you can help people.
So ultimately, it's driven by some ethical ideal of contributing to society and not just to yourself.
Well, I mean, if you make the best of yourself, then you will automatically be radiating that goodness to the people around you.
It does sound like Sufism.
Oh, there you go. I always end up in Sufism.
Well, yeah, but that's my ultimate question: is when you in the novel, your character is back in Tangier, and you're reflecting on really kind of the meaning of life. You're confronting questions of death, of life, big questions. And so the issue becomes, well, why write? Why have conversations? What's the point? Is it Epicurean? Is it just simply because you enjoy it? Or is it something that goes beyond that? And if it goes beyond that, how and why?
Yeah, I'm unable to penetrate the structure of my basically my intellectual life, what drives it, what
you can't penetrate it.
No, I mean it's more responsive than proactive. I'm more things happen, feelings. I see something, I get very excited. I mean, what gets me excited about a topic, a person, a story, a book?
Well, this place as well, right? Because this is kind of a book.
Yes.
Based on a vision, you pushed it forward and you helped create this.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, 3 years before this happened, I had no idea I was going to do this. And then it evolved slowly. It was part of a process, and we ended up doing this kind of work, and now we have this. So, yes, I mean, people at the university, when I was doing this, would think maybe it was a crazy idea, as I said in the video.
Well, you got a lot of opposition. Right?
Yeah, well, but we persevered, and now we have this.
You're a novelist. You're a scholar. You've written numerous books. Could you see this, the UNE campus, as a kind of book driven by the same passions that have driven your scholarship and your fiction?
Now I do. But in the beginning, I was another tension. I was conflicted about having to abandon my writing to do this. And in fact, it was a turning point in my writing life, because after this campus, except for this book, it's the longest period of time that I had without without doing a book. So
it was a major sacrifice.
It was a major sacrifice. I mean, by the time, because I was still researching, I was reading and working on a project, but it became impossible to reconcile both a thinking life and a hyperactive life.
Do you see that sacrifice you had to make reflected in in the novel somehow? Do you think that contributed as well to your sense of alienation from certain aspects of American life?
No, I mean the campus. I think this campus is really bridged the gaps. I mean, if there's any symbol of an edifice or a structure that bridges the gaps between the United States and Morocco, the Arab world, the Islamic world, and so on, Africa, you name it.
So
it
like
has done that.
Hercules. I have a quote from your book about Hercules. The narrator says that you're a modern day Hercules trying to connect the continents of Europe and Africa. And then goes on to say, you go on to say that it's no longer viable to be that Hercules. Is that a fair reading of that passage?
Yeah, I mean he's a modern day Hercules trying to connect. But if it's no longer viable, but globalization has eroded a lot of. There's another tension there as well, another conflict. So, it's good to connect people, but how do you connect people without doing the kind of model of globalization, economic globalization that we have today, or mass travel and those kinds of, because those are in the end kind of destructive.
Well, but at the same time, this a junior year abroad program depends on it.
Yes, but
depends on the ability of students to get onto an airplane.
I'd like to
faculty.
think what we did here is a positive side of globalization. Like we are bringing people together for education, for cultural experiences. We're not doing mass tourism. We're not doing, and we're not. It is not part of although tangentially maybe it's not part of the global capitalist ethic, which is to say like reach everybody, have everybody buy everything, that kind of thing. So this is a different way of knowing the world, basically.
Well, this doesn't have anything to do with the novel because it doesn't come in the novel, but how has your being Hercules, connecting up continents, impacted Americans at UNE, the students, the families? How has this program enriched them?
Well, I mean, we have a magazine, Moorish Tides, that shows the ways that they have been enriched by the experiences here, the parents and the evaluations, the interest in UNE by students who otherwise would not go to UNE because of our program in Morocco. So yes, it added life, a different kind of life, to a Maine-based institution. So now suddenly UNE, University of New England,
is a global institution.
Is a global institution, and so it has this personality now, this history, this character that I think serves it well, and because it does good things. And then we give great scholarships to our students. The program doesn't cost them any additional fees or anything. In other institutions, to study abroad, it's way more costly than it is at UNE. So in fact, it's a very good deal financially for students, to the extent that American students going to a private university have to pay tuition and fees and so on and so on. But the faculty here get an opportunity to teach the Moroccan faculty, American students, and so get exposed to a new kind of educational experience. So they're learning how to teach American students and what to expect from American students in terms of like student evaluations and so on. And then these American students have to take courses from Moroccan professors and also have that kind of experience. And then they travel, they meet with staff, they have Moroccan food. So it's all incredibly positive, I think. I mean, and we have a well-functioning system because we take care of students if they get sick, if something bad happens, if COVID happens, we're able to extract them.
And what I've learned recently is you're going to have your novel printed up here in Tangier for students, right?
Yes.
Both novels.
Both novels. I'm trying to make it affordable, like 30 dirhams, 40 dirhams. I don't know what the price. I'm not making money on them, so it's just because now they photocopy stuff, and so they don't have. I want them to get up, the pleasure of having a book.
Having that book in their hands.
Yes, having a book.
So in the novel, as we reach the end of the novel, your character is back in Tangier, right? Second chance. What is, first of all, the title, Second Chance? What does that mean? He's got a second chance? The first chance was what? And now the second chance? Was the first chance going to America? And second chance is coming back?
Good question. I mean, second chance is like, first chance maybe it's when he was here. When the first chance is when he is in Tangier, born and raised, and then that is his chance to be in Tangier. Then he gives it up, and now maybe it is now this is his second chance to be in Tangier again and see what he does with it. And
okay,
so,
now we're in fictional territory because you're still in America, but your character, does he have regrets about his past, or how does he feel about the previous decades when he looks back from the cafe or from Tangier, when he looks back on his life?
No, I don't think so. I don't think he has regrets. He's a college professor, this Silamin, and I think he does pretty well in that area. His wife is an academic too, and they both have the lives of academics, and they have one son, and so it's an average middle class life of a college professor in the United States. So
but he doesn't say many kind things about middle class existence in America,
but
right?
Yeah, but
I have a lot of quotes if you want me to find them. Lonely, disoriented, medicated, angry angels in America, dehumanized. The United States is more primitive than most underdeveloped nations, but he also talks about this sense of loss when he becomes middle class in America, right? Mm-hmm. Back in Tangier, does he feel liberated?
We'll see. Now, we'll see. Now,
the third novel, you mean?
Yes, the novel ends. The novel ends in that. But I think he's going through changes. I mean, he's not. I mean, many other Marcuse and many other people from German expatriates in America.
Went back to East Germany.
They came to America and they had some horrible things to say about it as well, because it's capitalism. It was a beacon of the great capitalist nation.
Are you a capitalist?
No, I'm not a capitalist.
In this book, you're very dubious about money grubbing, money motivated people in America. You think you really say the country's motivated by money, and everything else is secondary, right?
Yeah, I mean things are. I mean, well, I don't know what I say. I say different. I mean, America is a continent of people, so there are all kinds of experiences in it. But yeah, that's part of the American, and it's a very strong trait of America. It is like everything is transactional, and people do things.
Is it Aziz who tells you that in the novel that if you want to make money, go to America because
Yes.
that's a place to make money.
Yes.
If you want something else, don't go.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Is Aziz based on a real story?
Yes.
Why don't you say something about this, the tragedy?
But no, it's not parts of it are fictional.
Okay.
But the character as a whole is based on so it's inspired by. But in this particular case, yes, Aziz says in real life, yeah, I mean, what's the point of coming to America if you're not going to make money?
Lots of money.
Lots of money.
And he was good at it.
Yes. And then it gave me pause. That statement that yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, and then if you go back and think about the immigrant stories and all those, they're about opportunity. I mean, we call it opportunity and stuff like that. But
it's funny, but you're still fascinated. On the one hand, you lash out at this capitalist ethos. At the same time, you continue to be fascinated with the spaghetti western, and Trump is like a spaghetti western character, right? In the book. I don't mean in the real life, and I don't want to make this a conversation about politics, but he comes up in the book.
Very briefly.
Very briefly.
In one instance.
Because he angers the liberals, right? He angers people who really should be, like they're illusion should be exploded, and that's what he does, right?
Yeah, these are very exciting moments in America. And I've always said this, if we could have real conversations about this issue. What frustrates me, we recently had a speaker at my Center for Global Humanities, Kathleen Liu. She writes about I don't know what the holding society or something about people. And now she is coming at it. She's coming at the liberals from the left. And I'm scheduled to have a speaker also next fall. He's still a doctoral student at Columbia, but he's already publishing with Princeton University Press. I'm assuming he's doing the same thing. So we have lost that language, that position, because all our categories have been scrambled by the modern political realities in the United States. I mean, the Republican Party is not the Republican Party of Kissinger or Ronald Reagan. This is a different party, an entirely different political organization. And the Democrats are a very different organization.
Well, they're not the Democrats of Tip O'Neill either.
Blue-collar workers and everything else. So what we have is a very strange, the Democratic Party has become the party of identity politics, regardless of, and no discussion about class. But yes, but all the conversations about about race and gender and everything else. In the Republican Party, it's interesting. Most of the conversations are about preserving whatever it is that America stood for at one point, and about the dignity of the working class that has been abandoned by globalization. And so we want to have these conversations. Maybe the Republican Party is not the right organization to bring these people together or to express their view or to give some coherence to these frustrations that people have. Or maybe the Democratic Party is also incapable of figuring out its historical mission of working for the working classes, of defending the rights of the working classes, and at the same time be the showcase for Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, billionaires, and Hollywood and people and Wall Street people and stuff. So it's a strange political situation that's being drawn in the United States right now. But the pieces are moving fast, and nobody knows how to put them together and have a conversation.
Well, what's interesting to me in looking at the end of this novel,
yes.
how your character leaves, you're in fact trying to engender conversation through the Center of Global Humanities by inviting these people from different perspectives, not
yes.
just the liberal left, but also people from the right. And you relish in that kind of
yes.
Discourse and dialogue that rankles some people on the right because they or the left.
Yes.
I mean, because they don't think some people are should be dignified, but you think it's good to have a brawl. Like people with different attitudes should have it out, right? And discuss it openly. But in the novel, again, your character is back in Tangier.
Yes.
Has kind of given up on America, which you haven't.
But once again, I mean, most people, Americans who declare that they want to leave the country, is usually when a Republican gets elected president. I mean, the completely disenchanted Democrats and liberals. So I'm leaving. I'm going to Canada. They go to space. But this person leaves not because of the left or the right. It's just because of the nature, as you say, the American society is changing. I mean, there's something that is that's awry in the American fabric, and
he says someplace early in the novel that Tangier is the only place where he's whole.
Yes.
Do you feel that way?
But it depends on how. It depends again in the context, because whole. There's a spirituality here. There's a spirit in everyday life of Tangiers that gives you sustenance, that gives you this kind of fullness that is easy for a person who grew up here to find in the United States.
For you to find.
Yes, and so that is what. But on the other hand, there's I don't have these conversations with my Moroccan friends and buddies and family members. So, and this also makes me whole. So again, I am.
Well, because it's the wholeness that we're talking about
yes.
is something that they've so embodied that they don't talk about it because they live it, right?
Yes.
It's not an intellectual topic for them. It's something that's just...
Moroccans have a deep wisdom, and they're philosophical creatures, but they don't know it. If you pay attention to the everyday language and gestures, for example, they speak volumes, and they don't know it. They're just little gestures, little phrases, and those are the things that excite me about being here.
Well, there's a wonderful line, I don't remember where it is, I have it somewhere, but you'll remember, where you juxtapose like the cleaning ladies and truck driver, like working class Tangiers with professors and professionals in the U.S. And in that passage, you're really on the side of the working class in Morocco. Is that right?
Yeah, there are whole categories of workers, jobs that we never think about. Like I remember I was reading those truck drivers. There's a very iconic truck it's a big, looks like a tank. I don't know. It has like an M in the back. It looks like an M. They've been here forever,
right.
And we never think about who drives them. What do they do at the end of the day, and where do they go, or where do they sleep, and which cafes they go to, and other kind of things. And yet the country is full of these trucks, and so that made me think about all the other professions that people we see every day.
We raise children wanting them to have a profession, and
yes.
We don't expect them to be truck drivers. So your character ends up in Tangier. In your fictional imagination, what does he do in the next 20 years? Does he write more novels? Does he get back to his first love? And your first love intellectually, I think, is writing, is fiction, right? Is that fair to say?
I don't know. I really don't know what... yes, I left it open because the possibility of seeing what happens. I don't know what's going to happen to him, or maybe what happens to his interlocutor or his friend, his young friend, Rafiq, in the book. So I am kind of waiting and I'm watching them and see what happens.
Well, there's one passage where you say Tangier has lost some of its spirit because of globalization and the mass construction things. But in your imagination, looking in the future, does it maintain its soul? Is Tangier going to survive as Tangier in face of all of these changes that are coming from America, globalization and the wired, interconnected world? And
I see that hope also in little gestures and face and language, and young people, like teenagers. I run into them and the way they speak and polite. When I was in this cemetery the other day, there was a young teenager who was there through the whole day, was for the whole event. He just happens to be the son of a neighbor and stuff like that. He's helping, he's being helpful, caring. So I have hope. I have hope for the middle class, the average people in Morocco. For the elites, I don't know.
And what about their spirituality? Do you think Islam will continue to enrich people in a way it's disappeared in Europe and the U.S.?
Yeah. Well, the culture is deeply imprinted by it. So my example, the country that fascinates me the most is always Spain. You know, the deeply Catholic country.
That's yet a modern society.
That instantly turned into become a modern secular, a lot of it secular society. And yet when I am in Spain, I see nothing but traces. I see that Spain that I knew as a kid. I know the language. It's in the mannerisms, the language, the care, but also the harshness that was once associated with Spanish imperialism and all that. I see traces of those conquistadores are still there in Spain, in different guise.
Well, your book has come out in Spanish.
Yes.
And you gave some book talks.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about how the Spanish readers responded to this very modern, at the same time very Moroccan work of fiction.
Oh, the book that came out in Spanish, We Are All Moors.
Okay. Oh,
yeah,
I see.
not my novel.
I thought this came out.
No. No.
Any plans for this to come out in Spanish?
I don't know. I don't know. In Arabic. Now, the big problem now, I have one of my books translated into Turkish, one into Spanish, but the big thing here in Morocco is they don't have a single book all in Arabic. And so my friends and colleagues want to change that. They said, we'd like you to. So some are translating We All Moors and probably Second Chance in Tangier and See Yusuf into Arabic. So we'll see. I mean, but again, with the translations of those two books, I had nothing to do with them. It's just like somebody found them and wanted to publish them, and I just went along with them. I wrote a preface for each one of them. That's it. But the interesting thing about We Are All Moors is about in Spain, it's the title in English is a translation of something that was initially stated in Spanish, Somos Todos Moros. And now the book is going back to its origin, so to speak. And what's interesting is two people in one of the sessions in Santander, they both say, oh, my last name is Mora or some other Mora, so that we're all connected. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I want to hear from you. Like, once again, I touched on it, but what the main theme is of Second Chance in Tangier?
And it's a question. Thank you for asking, because I wanted to finish when I was telling you about this guy who's writing my biography. Aziz, he's been asking me questions for 4 or 5 years. He's a very skilled. I know you're a biographer yourself, but he's very good at making me forget the subject, and go for a year and come back with the same question in a different way.
Wow.
So I grew up. So what he did, he basically unleashed the reason why it came out as strongly autobiographical, is because he made me feel comfortable talking about myself.
And usually you don't feel comfortable?
No, I like to have a conversation, but usually not about myself. But especially intimate details and stuff like that. I mean, I grew up in a prudish environment in a different kind of way, But
you say at the same time in this novel, you've embodied the vices of Tangier.
Yes, yeah.
So the prudishness and the vices.
You don't talk about them. I see. Yeah, you don't talk about them. So, and you don't talk about people. And you respect people's privacy. So, for example, so that's why I thought maybe that's why the right format for me is a novel, not a memoir.
Well, okay, in this novel, you're addressing an interlocutor, younger, not really certain what he's going to do. Is he going to continue in academia or not? You don't seem to be encouraging him in that direction, but you don't tell him. Obviously, your role isn't to issue commands, but you're wiser and you've experienced what he wants to do. What is your message to him? Because it seems to me in my reading, and I don't want to project too much on it, but you're constantly coming back to kind of a spiritual essence of life here. That you're not going to get there.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yeah, for me, it may be true for me. I don't know. I don't know the metal, how other people are made. What is true, that's why I hesitate to give advice. I invite people into my circles. If we enjoy things together, that's great. That's a miracle. That's the best gift I can get. But I don't know what people are made of. That people are perfectly happy pursuing other things. Or maybe it makes them happier. And whereas for me, doing those things would make me miserable.
Well, you say somewhere here that people have everything they need inside them.
Yes.
Right? But they need to learn the skills of expressing what's inside. Is that right?
Yeah, I think people are perfectly made in so many ways. Especially, you can enrich those experiences. And I talked to this with Aziz by reading, watching movies, doing art. You are enriching. You are adding to your natural dispositions, or predispositions to and character, basically.
I have some quotes from the very end of the book. This seems to be an expression of your philosophy of life. The only remedy to this drudgery is an active imagination, sustained by deep compassion and nurtured by reading literature, history, and philosophy when it's not dry and pretentious.
That's it.
Stunning line, gorgeous. Is there anything you can add to that?
No, that's it. I mean, that sums it up for me. It's like you, I don't know how we get to be in touch with ourselves the way we do, the way I am. And then and that guides me actually, which explains, for example, this may explain why I love Faulkner or Gabriel Garcia Marquez for their writing styles.
What about Thoreau?
Thoreau, I like Thoreau too, but it was cold to me. He
Still
felt cold.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's like, he is very deliberate. I'm going to do this, I wake up, I do this,
That's right.
in the morning. I mean, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know how cold it was in
his cabin.
in his cabin, And that's what I mean. It's a Yankee thing. It's a.
You don't mention Whitman at all.
Whitman, yes. I like Whitman. But no, my favorite by far is Poe.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Why?
You're
talking about New England,
because
cold,
he is
puritanical.
He is the l'enfant terrible of American literature.
Yeah.
He is the artiste. He is the provocateur. He's like he is like the ghostly figure, and it's intriguing. Whitman encompasses the man. He embodies the spirit of
continent,
America. Yeah, the continent. He's big and he celebrates that.
So what would you, last question, let's say a reader, most readers are not going to be Moroccan probably. Say one of my students reading your book, this student is from small town New England. What do you say to her? How is she going to capture the life, the vitality that you express in your novel about you as a Moroccan? How is she going to do it in her context, coming from small town Maine or Massachusetts or somewhere in New England?
So,
what's your advice to them
I
as a
don't know.
novelist?
See, this is a curious thing. I think I wrote this novel for the Moroccan audience in English, because I didn't want to be constrained by thinking about
Publishers.
any audience.
Right.
I just wanted to write the way I felt, the way I see things, and in my mind, I'm writing for a Moroccan audience, because when you are guided by the principles of publishing in the United States, like you have to think of markets and who does and all that. So I didn't want to. I'm sending this book on its own journey,
It's like in the bottle, right?
in the
It's
bottle,
floating,
the message in the bottle.
Yeah. But still, your readers, like my students, are going to be reading this. Hopefully, they'll get a printed copy.
But I don't know I cannot predict what reaction they might have. Like there's some Americans. My old friend Ted DePadova, who's now living in California.
Yeah.
Ted. Yeah. He said he read the book. He actually has a comment on the website. There's a long comment, and it's kind of it's very interesting to read. So, and people are going to see in it things that they may have noticed before, but they didn't pay attention to, or they will surprise them altogether. Like people. I had huge admiration for the United States and for American people and all that stuff. And then I'm saying this kind of stuff. So and the Moroccans would be very surprised too. Maybe they will see the fact that for years now, a lot of people, because of my book, A Call for Heresy and other things, they see me as like in the pocket of the West, or have become like too westernized to understand Moroccan realities or Arab or Muslim realities.
So you're getting it from both sides.
Yeah, so I don't know. So the message will be, the reactions might be different in different places.
Yeah, if I can draw a message out of it, I think your book is about love.
Yeah, I think
and it's about love for people, love for a place, love for a language, and love for the rich tapestry around you, that you can reconnect to without leaving without leaving America, because your character doesn't really have to leave.
Yes.
You haven't left.
Yes.
But you can expand yourself and still be that Hercules, bringing. That's what you are.
Yes.
You're still a Hercules
Yes.
with the Center for Global Humanities. You're bringing people together, and hopefully we'll reinstate the lecture series here, because then you it really is like the picture of Hercules outside.
Yes.
You're stitching continents together.
Yes.
But in that spirit of a deep love for culture and kind of also
humanity.
And humanity, but also there's a moral outrage when that love is sapped, when it's like violated, right?
Yes. Especially when people are deprived of it, of the ability to experience that kind of love.
When they don't have the humanities experience that
Yes,
you had.
a lot of things get in the way, and so they're blinded by the other things, or they're being blocked, or they are prevented from, and that is a crime against humanity.
Yeah, it is. Well, I want to conclude our talk by crossing my fingers. I hope there's a third volume, a third novel, because I would love to see what your character does when he reestablishes himself here, and what his life looks like.
Well, okay, great. We'll see. We'll have to have another conversation in a few years.
Well, thank you for this experience.
Thank you.